This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. We begin with the life expectancy in the United States. It has now declined. Our Mark Martin is following this story for us. He joins us from the CBN Newsroom with more. Mark?
Ephraim, suicides and drug overdoses are behind a continuing decline in the number of years that Americans are expected to live. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says overall more than 2.8 million people died in the U.S. last year. That's nearly 70,000 more than in 2016. The 2017 number is the most deaths in a single year since the government started counting more than 100 years ago. The increase last year can be attributed to our country's growing and aging population, but experts say the number of deaths among younger people, especially those who are middle-aged, have had the biggest effect on life expectancy in the U.S.
On a medical level, what we're seeing is with the overdoses, we're talking about one main category of drug, and they're called opioids. And we've heard so much about it. Opioids, people are dying from three main types of opioids: the prescription drugs, heroin, and now fentanyl.
Mark, I think it's telling us very clearly that the answers out there in the culture is not working for people. We were not created for sin. We were created for holiness. And ultimately, sin will break your heart. It cannot fulfill you. And I think this is indicative of people saying, there's not enough here in this world apart from Christ, apart from God, that can fulfill me.
All right, we're going to go ahead and send it back to you, Ephraim. That's the latest on this report from the CDC.
All right, real quick, Mark, was there any good news to report?
Yes, among the nation's 10 leading causes of death, the cancer death rate dropped in 2017.
All right, Mark, thank you. A new government report says the safety of immigrant children in a federal shelter in Texas is at risk. It comes from the Health and Human Services Inspector General and cites concerns for the 2,300 teens who spend time in this tent in Tornillo. They arrive at the border alone, and they wait even weeks, sometimes months, as the government works to reunify them with family. The report also found the government failed to run fingerprint checks on the staff, and it said more mental health workers were needed. Faith-based groups like Bethany Christian Services and World Relief are also concerned about the results of this study.
We have seen children develop post-traumatic stress disorder, develop all kinds of eating disorders, develop other signs of stress, especially the younger the child. I know this is a teen facility for ages 13 to 17, but even teenagers are at risk for self-harm. They are at risk for developing very bad patterns of coping with trauma if that trauma isn't addressed early.
And Heather Sells is here now with more on this report. So what's the plan going forward?
Right. Well, there's a lot of concerns that this tent city is going to become permanent. It started in June, and they have just seen dramatic numbers. They've got over 2,300 youth there right now, and they are having a slow time moving them out. They're staying sometimes for months there, and they don't know how many more are coming. So there's concern that this tent city could indeed become a fixture.
I understand a group of pastors toured this shelter yesterday. What do we know about that?
Right. Well, I talked with Pastor Gus Reyes, who is with the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. He was in a small group of pastors, and two things they found that were exciting. One is they were really finding a lot of youth with faith, youth who were wanting to pray, and they're actually having evangelical services, Catholic services there. So that I thought was very hopeful. Also, he said that they are open to more ministry coming in, and so they are working to connect churches with this tent city to see what more they can offer these youth. So a lot of great opportunities there.
Yeah, that is encouraging news. Thank you so much, Heather, for that report. A Texas middle school has decided to allow its students to resume praying openly during lunch. The students at Honey Grove Middle School gathered in early September during lunch to pray for a classmate injured in an accident. Upon seeing it, the school's principal told them not to do it again, but later said they could pray behind the cafeteria stage curtain, outside, or in an empty gym. First Liberty Institute defended the students' rights in a letter. School officials have now, as you know, reversed that ban. Want to turn now from students' rights in middle school to students' rights in college. Christian and conservative college students say they're being silenced. New stats reveal a growing number are now keeping their religious and political thoughts to themselves. Senior Washington correspondent Jennifer Wishon joins us from D.C. with more.
If you're a college student and think you'll be seen as a bigot, less intelligent, or punished for sharing your beliefs or opinions. It's not surprising more and more students are self-censoring their constitutionally protected speech. An annual survey by Yale's William F. Buckley program finds a majority feel intimidated sharing their ideas, opinions, or beliefs when they're different from their professors. Even more feel intimidated if those views differ from classmates.
I have talked to students who say, you know what, we talk about politics in our dorm room with the door locked because we're scared of people telling on us.
Nikki Neely of Speech First keeps track of these free speech restrictions on college campuses.
If you think that you're going to get in trouble because your views are considered bigoted, hateful, defamatory, I mean, you know, of course you're not going to talk about them.
The survey also finds nearly 60% of students want speakers who have a history of using so-called hate speech banned from campus. And a third believe physical violence is justified to stop someone from making hateful or racially charged statements. The problem is determining what's offensive can be different for everyone. Students at some schools can even face punishment for private conversations.
There are portals on university websites where you can go in, you can type down, I heard Joe say, use this term in a classroom, walking down the hallway, I found it offensive and I think it should be investigated. And then that student is called in for a hearing.
So why is this happening now? Neely suggests it's a new generation of students created by helicopter parenting, bubble wrapping kids, and trophies for everyone.
So if you have grown up thinking that you're right and the first time you're told you're wrong or that you're being challenged on your views is when you're 18, of course there's going to be an existential crisis on campus.
Some schools, like the University of Chicago, are taking a stand for the First Amendment. In this letter to the class of 2020, the Dean of Students writes, "Our commitment to academic freedom means that we do not support so-called trigger warnings. We do not cancel invited speakers because their topics might prove controversial, and we do not condone the creation of intellectual safe spaces. Diversity of opinion and background," he continues, "is a fundamental strength of our community." More than 50 colleges and universities have made similar statements, and Neely suggests students find out where schools stand on speech before deciding where to attend. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Now, for more on this issue, we want to turn to Jennifer right now, who is in Washington. So, Jennifer, do you think there is a double standard when it comes to free speech and freedom of religion?
There absolutely is, Ephraim. You know, in that Buckley survey where we saw that 54% of students feel intimidated sharing their opinions or beliefs when they differ from their classmates, the same survey showed us that 62% of those identify as conservative or Christian. And so this is definitely a double-sided issue. There are reports of pro-life students on some campuses who want to put out a demonstration using grave markers to represent the unborn who have been killed by abortion, and then having colleges coming up behind them and putting out trigger warnings to warn other students they may be offended. However, we're not seeing the same trigger warnings put up for things that may offend those conservative or pro-life students. So there's really no question.
Now, Jennifer, in New Jersey, a private university pulled a Chick-fil-A as an option for students because of its owner's views when it comes to traditional marriage. Why do you think we're seeing things like this happen?
Well, as you know, Ephraim, Chick-fil-A has long been a target of the LGBT community. That's because the owner years ago said, look, I believe in a biblical definition of marriage. And so they're constantly under attack by the LGBT community. However, the last time I was at Chick-fil-A, it took me a while to get my chicken because there's just always a line there. But why is this happening? The Bible tells us that Christians will be persecuted. Those trying to live a godly life are going to face persecution, and we know that. And we also know that, the LGBT agenda, the more liberal sectors of society have done a really good job convincing the media and other institutions that their way is the right way, and that anyone who is opposed to them is wrong, is a bigot. And so I think it's important for, Christians and conservatives to, make their point. Don't let their speech be stifled, because it's a very important time for them to speak out so that people can better understand where they're coming from and why they feel so passionately about their opinions.
Yeah, we know that college is supposed to be a place for the free exchange of ideas, but you have these students being silent. How do you think these students can stand up for themselves?
Yeah. Well, we've seen there are some conservatives who have started some clubs on colleges, so-called, safe spaces for them to talk about politics, for them to talk about their ideas. But I'm not sure that that's the best avenue. I think students need to get to know each other. Ephraim, you and I know that once you graduate from college, you're going to face all kinds of adversity. You're going to be working alongside people in your job who you don't agree with, who don't agree with you, and you need to learn how to deal with that. And we're all Americans. We're all in this together. And so I think it's important for people to get to know each other, to take down the temperature and try to debate without getting angry. Violence has no place in this. And also, again, it's a good time for Christians to open their Bibles and really be able to defend their faith and be able to calmly explain why they believe what they believe, and then point back to Scripture. So it's a good time for, I guess, education. We're talking about college.
Indeed, indeed. Jennifer Wishon, thank you so much for that report. Senate Republicans and Democrats are asking the Treasury and IRS to delay implementing a law that could hurt churches. It would force ministries to file federal tax returns and, in some cases, pay taxes. Legislators want to hold back on the law until nonprofits can better prepare. It passed as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act last winter. Chief Political Correspondent David Brody is diving into the tax plan today on Faith Nation, beginning at 6 p.m. and then again at 9 p.m. right here on the CBN News Channel. Coming up, the new leader of Planned Parenthood takes on the Trump administration. We've got that story when we come back. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Planned Parenthood's new chief is setting the agenda for the nation's largest abortion provider. She says the goal is to protect women's reproductive health care services, and she's already fighting the Trump administration.
When they tried to impose a gag rule on what doctors are allowed or not allowed to tell our patients, only for reproductive health and women's health. Imagine if this were the case for any other medical procedure. It would be ludicrous.
Now, the gag rule was a proposed federal policy prohibiting federally funded clinics from providing comprehensive pregnancy options, including abortion referrals. The president of Students for Life, Christian Hawkins, joins us now with reaction to Planned Parenthood's agenda. So, Christian, Dr. Leanna Nguyen is a physician who believes abortion and reproductive services are part of the fundamental health care. How do you respond, Christian?
Well, it's very simple. Abortion is not health care. Planned Parenthood is not an institution where women go for a flu shot or a checkup. Planned Parenthood is an institution where women go when they feel like they have no other choice, when they have to choose to pay someone to kill the very life that they helped to create. And no matter who says it, whether it's Leanne Nguyen or Cecile Richards, no matter how many times they try to normalize it, abortion will never be considered normal health care.
What's Planned Parenthood asking Congress, and what are your concerns here?
Well, Planned Parenthood is very concerned right now that their federal taxpayer dollars, the dollars that you and I give them, are on the chopping block. I was at the White House just yesterday meeting with other pro-life leaders and administration officials, pushing President Trump to uphold his campaign promise to defund Planned Parenthood. They want to see their funding increased. They want to go into middle schools and high schools and get paid to do sex education for our young people, to drive young people back to their abortion business. They also want to see the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, which is the federal amendment that bans taxpayer dollars from explicitly paying for abortions and Medicaid. They want that repealed as well as the Democratic Party.
What were you hearing in terms of the response from your visit to the White House?
Well, obviously, the officials we met with were very receptive to our messaging because we do have such a pro-life president and President Trump. But what we were asking, the president to do is something hard, not to sign any pieces of legislation, any budgets that come to his desk that include Planned Parenthood funding. And that's something we've been very disappointed that the Congress has failed to do in the past 2 years, despite being led by pro-life GOP members, that they kept passing budget after budget that continues Planned Parenthood's funding. I mean, this is outrageous. And so we're asking President Trump to pull a hard line here and tell Congress, I'm going to veto anything that funds Planned Parenthood. And that's what we expect of him.
Now, we know that the Democrats will take control of the House come next year. What do you expect to see achieved with the pro-life movement following that?
Sure. Well, the Democrats are going to do everything they possibly can. Like I said, in 2016, they changed their official platform to call for abortion all 9 months of pregnancy for whatever reason and taxpayer funded. So they're going to try to repeal the Hyde Amendment. They're going to try to force you and I to pay for abortions. Thankfully, we still have we have a pro-life majority now in the U.S. Senate. Thankfully, we have President Trump. So I think what they're going to try to do is going to be a lot of wasted time and energy because it won't be able to advance because of the Senate, because of the president. So that's one of the biggest things. I think a lot of things that they're going to try are going to be ceremonial, trying to gin up Planned Parenthood in their base to get more supporters to turn out for 2020.
Last thought, what would you say to people watching in terms of how they can support the cause?
We need you. We need your voice. I need you calling the White House switchboard. I need you tweeting at President Trump, tweeting and calling your congressman, telling them to uphold their promise, uphold that campaign promise that President Trump made to us to defund Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion vendor.
All right, Kristen Hawkins, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Popular Christian artist Natalie Grant testified on the reality of modern slavery before the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, and she was honored to speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves.
My daughters are living in a world where slavery still exists, where someone's daughters, someone's sister, someone's niece, someone's granddaughter is being ravaged day in and day out. I commit my life to Proverbs 31:8, which says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed." I have seen those who are crushed, and I say that together we must do whatever it takes to give them justice.
Some 78,000 viewed Natalie Grant's testimony. China's government has stopped the work of the medical team behind the world's first gene-edited babies. The country's vice minister of science and technology says his department is strongly opposed to efforts to produce the twin girls born earlier this month. New research shows generations of bad genes no longer have to control your life. See how scientists say we can turn off genes that were passed down to us. We've got that story coming up next. Scientists have been studying the fascinating field of epigenetics for the last 5 to 10 years. One key discovery is we can turn certain genes on and off. What's more, these changes can be passed down through generations, which is something we've read about in the Bible. Here's Lori Johnson with more on this story.
Like millions of Americans, Ashley Skidmore joined the trend of taking at-home DNA tests.
All of my friends were doing just the ancestry test, and I just decided on a whim to throw in the health section.
The results indicated Ashley inherited a gene that often leads to lung disease.
I took the results to my doctor, and my doctor was very alarmed by the results, and I had no idea what it even was.
The good news, thanks to the new science of epigenetics, there's hope for Ashley and others. DNA is not our destiny, because even if we inherited some genes we'd rather not have, epigenetics tells us we can turn them off. In his book, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life, Dr. Kenneth Pelletier says we control our genes, not the other way around.
How we live our lives and how we influence the expression of our genes, that's what's critical. So it gives us the responsibility and gives us the power to influence our life direction.
He says bad genes are activated by bad behavior. In Ashley's case, smoking turns on her problem gene.
That's what makes the gene express itself. But if you know you have it, then you can not smoke and you'll avoid the consequences.
It gives me hope that I can silence it. But if I were a smoker, it's basically my life expectancy is 50 years old.
Epi means on top of. Our epigenome is like flexible software on top of our genome, which is like fixed hardware. Our behavior controls the epigenome, which in turn controls the genes.
We are, in effect, a programmable computer. That's how we were made.
Equally fascinating, researcher Dr. Randy Jertle proved epigenetic changes don't just stop with us. For better or worse, these gene manipulators can actually be passed down to future generations, backing up the biblical warning written thousands of years ago.
you can see that in effect what God, I think, was telling us is that since they're not totally erased necessarily from generation to generation as they go through the egg and the sperm, can literally give rise to problems in the next generation, in the following out the 4 and 5 generations.
When Dr. Jertle fed healthy nutrients to pregnant mice, which carried a gene for obesity and jaundice, her offspring were born thin and brown.
There are these transgenerational changes that take place.
Dr. Pelletier believes similar scenarios play out in human beings.
So the good news, if you make a healthy change, it'll be transmitted through your generations. If you make an unhealthy change, it will also influence subsequent generations. I mean, this is a whole fascinating new technology.
So while we can't control the genetic hand we're dealt, the new science of epigenetics tells us we can control how these genes behave in ourselves and our offspring.
Still ahead, the Grinch stole not Christmas? Up next, the irony behind an anti-Christmas tree display being targeted now by thieves. Members of a satanic organization say visitors are taking ornaments from their Christmas in the Park tree display. The California-based group of atheistic Satanists say it hung 140 ornaments and are now quickly running out. Group members are pleading for people to stop stealing. Park goers say the tree shouldn't be there in the first place.
I think it's not correct to put that here, and especially they accepted to have that tree here.
It's kind of ironic that there's a satanic Christmas tree just in general. I'm surprised more hasn't happened to it.
Last year, a tree sponsored by a different satanic group had its topper, a giant black goat head, stolen. Park officials say stolen ornaments are not specific to the satanic-sponsored trees. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.